Okay, friends, Margaret Powell is here today to talk about nutrition, metabolism, women's health, staying sane, all the things. Welcome, friend.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I am so excited to chat with you today. Number one, because you always make me laugh following along with you on Instagram and stuff. Like, I'm always laughing. One minute, you guys, she's sharing like a recipe. The next minute, she's like dancing. So if you don't if you don't follow Margaret while you're listening, look her up on Instagram. But number two, I'm excited because the way you teach about health and food is like the opposite of intimidating. And it makes me, when I'm learning from you, feel like empowered, like, okay, I can actually do this, or I could actually make that recipe. It's not like I have to go buy this weird food I've never heard of or this appliance or something. And so I'm just excited for our listeners to feel that too. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I do try to really, keep it real and make what I share achievable for anyone to do. I really have a heart for the woman that's busy and has a lot going on and doesn't have tons of time to stress out about food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously, which is all our listeners. I think like we did a poll recently and like over 50% were mamas and 80% were entrepreneurs. So people listening have stuff on their plate. So let's start by sharing like your story with listeners about, why you're passionate about metabolic health and this topic as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story pretty much starts when I was around 14, 15, got my first period, and I had really bad monthly cycles. It was so bad to the point that I would miss school for a day or two. I had a lot of digestive issues. At the time, my family doctor thought I had an ulcer, and at one point had me on like a broth and cracker diet to help with my digestive stuff. Fast forward a year or two, I ended up going on birth control at age 16 to help with my PMS and my periods. And I also had like the acne. And at the time, that was just, here, just go on the pill. Right. And I ended up being on birth control for pretty much 10 years straight until it was time to start a family. When I was 26, I went off birth control and had no clue what it was like to have a menstrual cycle or have a period, or I was so disconnected with my body's hormones and all of it, and went off the pill and had my first miscarriage. And I remember being like, what now? Like literally Googling how to regulate my period. I would, after having that miscarriage, I would go like 45 days in between periods. My OBGYN at the time was basically like, this happens. We really don't worry about it until you've had three miscarriages. Your body was able to get pregnant. It'll happen. And that was kind of my first venture into hormone imbalance and just struggling with that aspect of my health. And, I went on then to have four pregnancies and two babies in basically 4 years, and my husband owns multiple businesses. We're business owners, and I was very involved in helping with his businesses.
Mhm.
And I had started a young living business shortly after I had Turner, who's my second child. And so I had this long season of, just really burning the candle at both ends, having,
Mhm.
pregnancy, having a miscarriage. Then I got pregnant again, sleepless nights, breastfeeding, running business, over exercising. I was the woman that really thought exercise was the key to having more energy, and exercise was the key to being healthy. And I had a home gym. And then at one point, I was going back and forth to our gym locally with both kids. I would load them up in the stroller and race to the gym and race to my 9 a.m. class and put them in gym childcare, which at the time that was a lifeline for me. But that fast paced lifestyle that I was doing was putting me into full blown exhaustion and burnout, and I didn't understand how important it was to rest and honor my body's hormones and, fuel my body properly. I was under eating. I didn't know how to even fuel my body properly. I would just jump on whatever fad diet was in. I did Whole30 2 years in a row, paleo. I had tried low carb diets. And the longer that I, operated in this stressed out state, the worse my hormones were, and so at the peak of my hormone struggles, I had really bad cystic acne, super painful periods. Like when my period would come, I would have to call Tyler and be like, hey, if there's any way you can come home from work early. My cramps were so bad, I'd, be up in bed and just I would be out. And I had this cycle that when my period would come, I just wanted to lock myself in my room and hide from my family. My anxiety was really bad, sleep, like I just had all of the classic signs of hormone imbalance. And, I felt like I was eating really healthy. We were buying organic foods and going to local farmers markets. We were using clean products in our home, right? I was really into essential oils and non-toxic products. Like I felt like I had a good grasp on what healthy was, but I had this super high stress lifestyle and, just still felt like crap, and I was at the time when this was really at its peak, I'm 34 now. At the time I was 32 and was just like, I am too young to not have a sex drive. I am too young to have all this anxiety, no energy. Like, is this it?
Yeah.
And I remember going to my OBGYN the one year for my annual exam and telling her just like the acne, the anxiety, the sleep issues. And she was like, well, you could just go back on the birth control pill. Like that was always what they told me to do.
Yeah.
And that just was not a good enough answer for me. And so that was kind of the impetus that pushed me into learning more about nutrition and holistic health. It was really more to like, for me to learn how to heal my own issues. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I also saw like the women around me were struggling with very similar things too. And so that's what really got me into the nutrition. And I ended up pursuing a certification in holistic nutrition, and really dug into women's health and women's hormones. And I got turned on to this whole world of pro-metabolic eating, which is eating for your metabolism and your hormone health, and realized like, wow, a lot of the healthy foods that I was eating are actually not as healthy as I thought they were. I was buying like what's a good example? I mean, I was eating, lots of vegetables. I would eat like a big kale salad all the time, which I've since learned that eating too many cruciferous vegetables can actually slow down your metabolism. Your body doesn't need tons and tons of vegetables, right? I realized that my 4 to 5 day a week HIIT workouts were tanking my adrenals. And I should also say, when I was in the peak of trying to work on my hormones and figure out how to solve a lot of these different symptoms I was dealing with, I had tried everything. I had eliminated dairy, gluten. I did a candida cleanse. I tried eating vegan for 3 months. I was doing a lot of restricting, cutting out sugar. I mean, I feel like I had literally tried everything, which I look back and I'm like, I don't have regrets on that because it helped me realize what didn't work.
Right.
And so when I stumbled upon this community of practitioners and doctors that were pushing, hey, let's eat for your metabolism and your hormones, and this is what it looks like, it was literally everything that is against diet culture.
Yeah.
Pro-metabolic eating is not focused on counting calories and restriction. It's focused on eating foods that support your cells on a biological level, right?
Right.
And it felt so simple and basic, but so freeing. And I implemented this way of eating last summer, just kind of like, you know what? I'm going to reintroduce dairy again. I'm going to start not stressing over carbs anymore. I'm not going to count calories. I'm not going to stress about exercising all the time. If I want to exercise, I will, but if I don't feel like it, I'm not going to beat myself up over it,
Yeah.
And I started learning too about my menstrual cycle and how to eat around my cycle and how to exercise around my cycle. Like I've since learned that there's times of the month that you're better off doing HIIT workouts. And then there's times that you're better doing strength training or yoga or just going for a walk.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say it was last summer that I really dug in on this way of eating. And, I went from getting my period every 19, 20 days and having
Hmm.
really painful, bad PMS to normal cycles. My skin cleared, my energy came back, my anxiety got better, my sex drive returned.
Yeah.
Which if you've dealt with a low sex drive or low libido, I know that like that might be TMI for people listening, but as when you're in your 20s, 30s, even into your 40s, like that is the prime time from a fertility standpoint to have a normal, healthy sex drive. And so many women don't, and that's not right.
Yeah. And it's hard to like, you don't have a ton of women saying or feeling safe to say, I don't have a sex drive or. And I think as you were sharing your story, I'm just like, I think the details of everyone's story, of course, are different, like the number of kids or whatever. But as you're sharing, I'm like, this is unfortunately the anthem of so many people's from getting your period as a teenager and it being really, really bad. And then the doctor putting you on birth control. Like, I'm just sitting here nodding my head, like, is she talking about me or her? And
Yeah.
I know we all know how many friends, how many women who have this same story. And in a way, it's like just so frustrating and heartbreaking. But then the flip side of the coin, it's like, if this is so common, we shouldn't feel or we don't have to feel shame for having these things. We can feel empowered, like, okay, she went through this. I feel like for so many listeners, they probably were hearing you talk and like, what is she talking
Yeah.
about me? So I hope that that was like exciting for people because even for me, I'm like, okay, wow, this sounds so familiar.
Yeah, it's the story for so many women. And I don't want to demonize and place blame on the medical system and say like it's their fault because they're not given the tools really to walk alongside a woman that's struggling with bad hormone stuff and periods and say, hey, like, let's really talk about your diet. Let's talk about your
Mm-hmm.
stress and your lifestyle. Like, when I look back to what I was eating and my lifestyle when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, and look back, it's like, well, no wonder I had so many problems. I was eating Doritos every day after school. And, we drank soda and easy mac and cheese and Pop Tarts for breakfast. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was eating a ton of processed foods and not a lot of fresh foods. And we didn't know. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a teenager, we did not know what that stuff did. Right.
Right.
But I do remember when I went through going on birth control, there was no question of like, well, what's your diet look like? Or have you
Yeah.
experienced, at the time when I was, in high school, I had, two parents that were addicts. And my childhood years, especially during high school, were really it was a very dysfunctional situation. And I was going back and forth between living with my dad and stepmom, and then I'd go stay with my mom and my grandmother. And even that I've learned can really influence how your hormones are exposed. If
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with trauma or dysfunction or high stress, high
Yeah.
cortisol from lots of stress, like that'll throw things off, right? But yeah, it's hard because you really do see where we're failing
Mm-hmm.
women with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like I love what you said about, you went back to the OBGYN and she said you can go back on birth control and you just were not going to accept that. And I think oftentimes like we'll get an answer from a medical professional or someone and we know in our gut like that isn't what I need to do, but we feel like they're in charge, but like
Yeah.
knowing like listening to that, inner knowing of this this is not it. Keep looking
Yeah.
for answers. Keep like they work for you, and be your own advocate. And like, I love
Yes.
that you listen to that. And I feel like I am just now learning to like really listen to that. And I just think that's such a good word for listeners to know. Like, if you're told something, they aren't God, they don't know everything. And I think the best doctors and healthcare professionals are the ones that admit, like, I don't know everything. Get
Yeah,
a second opinion. Those are the best, you know?
absolutely. And there's also seasons for this. Sometimes we're in a place where the birth control or the band-aid solution is just what we got to do to get by because
Hmm.
we're not in a place of being able to really focus on our health, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So I don't fault women for deciding to do that. But I felt like at the time I was like, this is not a long-term solution. I don't want to be on birth control for 20 years, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so I know you're really passionate about like debunking diet culture, especially because, like you said, you have tried them all pretty much. So, can you
Yes.
kind of explain for people who are listening that are like, what is diet culture? Like, can you just break that down to start?
Okay, good question. So diet culture, I would say, is right now what I see in diet culture is it's very focused on appearance and looking a certain way. There's always that big push of having the perfect body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to remind women that thinness does not equal health. And what I see happening in diet culture right now is it's very focused on either restricting or eliminating a certain food or food group. There's especially like the carb, the keto low carb craze of carbs will make you fat, carbs are bad, right? I also see that even with the plant-based eating. Some of my education and books that I had to read for my certification, really talked about the importance of implementing more plants into your diet. And there's a lot of articles and studies, quote unquote, studies out there that
Mm-hmm.
say, animal fats and animal proteins will lead to high cholesterol, and the reality with studies is you can make any study show what you want it to show, and you have to
Yeah.
follow who's actually funding the study. And I urge
Mm-hmm.
people to really focus on how you want to feel, not how you want to look. When I ate plant-based, that was the peak of when I felt the worst personally. But yeah, what I see with diet culture right now is just a lot of restricting and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, demonizing foods. And it puts women in this place of utter confusion, overwhelm. It also disconnects us from our body. It disconnects us from our relationship with food. I mean, God gave us things like the ability to smell and taste. And if you know anything about how the brain works, our memories are stored in our limbic system in our brain. And there's a reason why certain foods will elicit a certain emotion or a
Mm-hmm.
memory. And a lot of what diet culture pushes suppresses that relationship with food. And it's so structured on rules like no eating after dinner and the intermittent fasting culture right now that's really big on only eating in an 8-hour window, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how we were biologically designed to live, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And it's hard because people say, like, eat like our ancestors ate, right? But we're not living at all like our ancestors lived. You can't compare. I mean, yes, we can draw from our ancestors on certain aspects of nutrition, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not apples to apples. Yeah, our ancestors didn't walk around with smartphones in their hands, and they didn't drive cars. They didn't have
Yeah.
high, stress, fast paced lifestyles. Like it's not even close to the same.
Yeah, that is so true. And like, I feel like I got in the spiral of like the food documentaries that kept coming out. And I think I was in this trap of like, it's a documentary, it must be true, you know? And I think like it
Oh,
just goes
yes.
back to like, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. It's true with that too. And I think so often when we try to do better, we get caught up in this like almost like you're in the middle of like a tornado. Like I'm sure you felt this and listeners have felt this of like what do I eat or what do I do?
Yes.
Because this person's saying this is wrong and this is saying this is wrong. And I feel awful on this. And it's so confusing. And it just leaves you in this place of like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I don't know what to do, where to turn, all of that. Like, it's just really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things, like with specifically, I'm thinking of like dairy. Right now, I see there's a lot of like the plant-based milks, like almond milk
Hmm.
and coconut milk, and oat milk is really popular. Soy was
Hmm.
popular for a while, which a lot of people now know that soy milk is not something that you should be drinking on the regular. And I kind of find it funny that we're trying to mimic things like meat or mimic things like regular milk with a fake alternative. And many of these products are packed with additives and thickeners and emulsifiers and all of these junky, industrial seed oils, all these
Hmm.
junky ingredients that can destroy your gut, lead to more inflammation. And it just makes me laugh because I have a couple friends that are like really into their plant-based milks, and they're like, oh, dairy upsets my stomach. Dairy is super inflammatory. I hear that a lot. I believe
Hmm.
that for a long time too. And I think we have to ask ourselves, like, is it the dairy that's inflaming your gut, or is it the fake foods that you're eating that are inflaming your gut? And when you really get back to the root of food and what it's supposed to do from a biological level to support your metabolism, the fake replacement stuff is not cutting it. It's just
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. That's a good word for sure. And like,
Yeah.
I I think I saw one of your stories or a reel or something that you had made with like, what to, if you are going to drink nut milks, like look for this. And of course, like I go to my fridge and like that gar and gum or whatever it's called
Yeah.
is like right on the
Yep.
label. But it's so true. And it's like we think that we're doing better. And so you mentioned metabolism a couple of times. So I want to like dive into that because speaking for myself, but I feel like a lot of people are this way. I never truly understood metabolism. Like my past understanding up until you started doing this work and sharing it on social media was like, to me, metabolism was people would just tell me, like, oh, you have a fast metabolism because I am not a huge, like, I don't work out a ton, but I'm thin. And so people just said, you have a fast metabolism. And like, which again goes back to
Yeah.
what you were saying about like thin doesn't always mean healthy. Like people would always comment like you're so lucky, blah blah blah. And I'm like, thanks, I feel terrible. I have all these autoimmune illnesses and I'm getting iron infusions and taking all these things. But
Yeah.
sure. That's a little side note, but it's just like so fast metabolism was all I really knew about metabolism was just like if you're thin, if you can eat a cupcake and not gain 5 pounds, you have a fast metabolism. I feel like that's all a lot of people like hear about it.
Oh, yeah. It's
Um,
so true.
so like what does our metabolism do? Why is it important? Can you go over like the basics of that?
Yes, absolutely. It's such a good question. So, your metabolism is your body's ability to, take the food that you're eating and the calories that you're intaking, whether it's through food or what you're drinking, and the body's ability to then convert it into energy. Okay. And a fast metabolism is a body that generates heat, right? So it's a body
Mhm.
that has a decent body temperature. You don't have the cold hands and feet. You're not cold all the time. A fast metabolism means you have a painless, normal, regular menstrual cycle, clear skin, normal digestion, the ability to go to the bathroom at least once a day, preferably
Mhm.
twice, which a lot of people don't. It's not just about weight. I mean, weight is a part of it as well, but it's more focused on how you feel, your energy.
Yeah.
A solid, healthy metabolism has enough energy to get through the day without needing to drink lots of coffee, right? You're able to exercise and move your body without crashing later on in the day. Yeah, it's the body's ability to take what you're eating and what you're drinking and what you're doing and using it for energy effectively to fuel your cells, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of your
That is,
crash
no, that
course.
is very interesting. And I think it is so important to note, just like everything else, like just because you're thin, that can be genetics,
Right.
which I think like for me, it is. I don't think I have a fast metabolism. Everything that you were just naming, I'm like, nope, nope, nobody. And
And
so,
some of those things are, you know, inherited genetically. That is true. I
mhm,
mean, some of the health issues that we experience are a byproduct of what we, you know, got from our ancestors.
yeah. So, yeah, I think it's so important to like, I like that you listed those things because that is all I ever heard about metabolism was like if they're thin without working out, they have a fast metabolism. And it's just like not
Yes.
that simple. So, yeah. What
And
are, yeah, go
real
ahead.
quick too, it goes without saying that it's not just about the food you eat. You can have the most high quality, nutrient dense diet. You can be super on point with your nutrition, you know, but if you are slathering on products with lots of toxins in them, or you're drinking crappy drinking water, or living a high stress lifestyle, not getting enough sleep, those things impact your metabolism as well.
Yeah. And that's just like being healthy. I always thought like this is a perfect example before I started using essential oils. I thought like, and which then led me to using non-toxic products. So like I thought, oh, we're so healthy because we eat right or whatever, but like health and good health has so many pillars. And so sometimes we think like we're healthy because we exercise. But like if this piece and that piece are missing, that's why we feel bad.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yes.
not if you just have one pillar, it's not all of health. It's not the whole umbrella.
Yes.
And that's so important, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so what are some of your easy to implement like nutrition habits that you recommend specifically for women?
Good question. So I actually got this question the other day from someone that was like, if I wanted to get started on balancing my hormones and restoring my metabolism, whatever, like where would you start? And the first place I would start is eliminating what I call PUFAs. PUFAs are polyunsaturated fats, and PUFAs are found in a lot of processed foods. Not to say that you should never eat a food with a PUFA in it, but
Hmm.
I don't think we realize how often we're consuming them. So PUFAs will be like your canola oil, palm oil, vegetable oil, soy, which you know it's a lot in a lot of processed foods like cookies and crackers and cereals, even in our ice cream. It's in a lot of nut milks and non-dairy
Hmm.
milks. Even, believe it or not, nuts and seeds and legumes can have PUFAs in them.
Hmm.
And what happens is, you know, if you're drinking the almond milk and you're baking with almond flour, or you know the you know non-regular flours, and you're eating processed foods with PUFAs, and then you get Chinese takeout on Friday night, which has soy in it,
Yeah.
suddenly, you know, you look at your diet, or even like tortilla chips. Like, I think Siete chips are the only tortilla chip I have been able to find that are cooked in coconut oil. They're not cooked in vegetable oil or canola oil. And you don't realize how quickly, if you look at your week's worth of food intake, you're like, it's in everything.
Hmm.
Um, and I still consume foods that have PUFAs in them. But if you're in a season of really needing to dial in and heal and overcome some chronic things that you're dealing with, that is the first thing that I would say to cut out, you know, the nut butters and, you know, eating the whole handful of almonds or the nut milks and things like that. What happens with PUFAs is they create oxidative stress when you go to consume something with a PUFA in it, when the heat of your body, when your body goes to metabolize that food, the heat from your body breaks down that oil and it creates an, you know, oxidative stress, free
Hmm.
radicals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can damage your cells and it can cause a whole slew of health issues. They can be very inflammatory to your gut as well, which I cannot stress enough how important it is to support our gut health. It impacts so many things, as you
Yeah.
probably know.
Yeah. Yes.
That would be the first place that I would start, is cutting out, they're really an anti-nutrient. They don't do
Mm-hmm.
anything positive for your body. And I talk about gut health a lot because, again, you could be eating all of the right foods, but if your gut is not well supported, your body's not going to properly absorb the nutrients in the food that you're eating,
Right.
right? And you could be eating, an 1800 calorie, 2000 calorie diet and think like, okay, I'm eating enough food. I'm eating high quality foods. But if your body's only able to absorb 70% of that nutrients, you actually need to be eating a higher calorie above that to get what your body needs. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, that does. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. So what is pro-metabolic eating? Can you kind of explain like what that is and why it's important?
Okay. So it's eating in a way that supports your metabolism. So when I look at a food now, if I'm making a decision of what I'm going to eat, I look at, okay, I have a plate in front of me that I need to fill with food for lunch. And I want to fill it with protein first, which
Mm-hmm.
is typically I'm eating animal protein. I do chicken, beef, lamb, shellfish, cod, oysters, shrimp, things like that. I don't eat a ton of pork. I'll have bacon from time to time, or we'll cook like a pork shoulder and make pulled pork. But, so protein first, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
eggs, protein from dairy. I
Mm-hmm.
aim to have about 20 to 25% of my plate be some protein, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I want some carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are the body's preferred source for energy. And
Mm-hmm.
I like to eat easy to digest carbohydrates like fruit, some ripe, fresh fruit. Right now, mangoes is in season right now. Berries are coming into season. Citrus fruits. Some other carbs that I'll have is I love sourdough. You might see I bake my own sourdough. Root vegetables are great. Rice. I'll do like some white rice or basmati rice, and then a little bit of fat. And again, I talked about those polyunsaturated fats. I try not to have my fat be something like nuts or
Mm-hmm.
a PUFA. I opt for saturated fat. So for me, that might be some butter on my sourdough toast or a couple pieces of a really high quality cheese. There's also fat in a lot of the meats that we eat. If you're making
Yeah.
chicken, like chicken thighs, like there's automatically going to be fat in that. And so, when you balance your plate with a combination of some good protein, some easy to digest carbohydrates, and some good quality saturated fat, that is supporting what your metabolism needs. Okay. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing I look at is I try to look at food of, is it going to support and offer calories and good nutrition for what my body
Mm-hmm.
needs? And then I ask, is there anything in this food that could be inflammatory or has any anti-nutrients in it? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that I never consume foods that are suppressive to my metabolism, but I do try to limit them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those foods that could have suppressive qualities to your metabolism are things like raw cruciferous vegetables. I used to load my lunch with salad. Like every
Mm-hmm.
day, I would do a big leafy green salad with spinach or kale or spring
Mm-hmm.
mix, which a lot of those cruciferous vegetables have compounds in them that are God given compounds that are in that food to prevent animals from wanting to eat them. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those foods, when you consume them in high amounts, can trigger a really inflammatory response. That's why, like, when you eat Brussels sprouts, or for some people, if they have broccoli or kale, you
Mm-hmm.
get kind of that bloating and digestive upset.
Yeah.
And that's not the case for everyone. Some people can tolerate lots of vegetables just fine.
Hmm.
But for me, when I was, really dealing with a lot of imbalances and gut issues and my cycles were all over the place, I had to really cut out, beans and a lot of the vegetables that I was eating. I didn't
Yeah.
eat kale and any of that stuff for a while, and really saw a lot of those symptoms clear when I cut a lot of those foods out. And
Mm.
now I've been able to kind of reintroduce, I don't eat salad all the time anymore. I went from eating salad like every day to now I have a salad once a week. Yeah.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I like for me, nursing, I like we'll have big salads for dinner or something. And like, I'm like, what is wrong with me that I am still starving? Like, I feel like I didn't eat anything.
Because you need
And I
carbs.
feel, yeah. And it's like with breastfeeding, like compared to Dave, I'm just like, I feel like I am just, he's like, oh, that was so filling. And I'm like, I am not, I don't feel full at all, but I just ate a bunch of spinach or kale. So that's really
Yes.
interesting.
And an issue I see with a lot of women is we are not getting in enough protein for
Hmm.
sure. And we're not eating enough of the right carbs.
Hmm.
I used to have the same thing. I would eat a big leafy salad and I would put like goat cheese on it and pumpkin seeds and, just like doctor it up with some fun toppings and a good dressing. And I'd throw on some protein like grilled chicken or whatever. Or sometimes I'd fry an egg or two and put that on a salad. And within an hour, I would be hungry. And it's because I
Yeah.
didn't balance it with a good amount of carbohydrates.
Wow. That's so interesting. Okay. Can you remind us again, just for people listening, what are like some signs of a slowed metabolism? So, like, if people are listening and like, okay, this sounds interesting. I wonder if I have a fast or slow one. What are some like signs?
Okay, good question. So, some signs would be if you're cold all the time, the cold hands and feet, low body temperature. I always tell people buy a cheap digital thermometer and take your temperature when you wake up before you get out of bed and see where it is. If your temperature is below 97.8, really, if it's in like the low 97s, 96s, I've even had women have temperatures in the 95 range. That is too low. That is a
Hmm.
sign of a slowed down metabolism. Your morning temperature should be at least 97.8 or higher. You also will see it change as your cycle goes on, like your body temperature actually goes up after you
Mm.
ovulate,
Hmm.
and that's due to the hormonal fluctuations. Other signs would be slow digestion, no sex drive, irregular cycles, or bad PMS.
Hmm.
Um, what else? Unexplained weight gain. You haven't changed anything. You haven't, and also unexplained weight loss too. If you haven't changed anything in your diet and you haven't changed your exercise habits and you're losing weight or gaining weight and you're kind of like, what's going on? That's a sign that something could be off. And the reason I talk a lot about supporting metabolism is your metabolism impacts so many things: your thyroid, your hormone health with your cycles. It can impact your fertility. It impacts your gut health, a lot of
Yeah.
different aspects of the body. And I like to tell people, look at your metabolism as a car, and your food and your nutrition is gasoline for your body, right? Your
Mm.
self-care practices that you do to, support your health, that's gasoline for your body, right? Even some supplements that you can take. Like, I'm not against supplements, but I think also we culturally kind of can overdo it.
Hmm.
But there are some really high quality targeted supplements that you can take that can also kind of fill the gaps in your nutrition, that also serve as fuel for the body.
Yeah. Wow. This is fascinating. um, okay. So I know you like are really passionate about stress too. And like
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, like you see both within yourself and like the women you work with, stress being the root of a lot of health issues. So what does it like look like to implement stress reduction?
Good question. Well, I think we have so many habits that we don't even realize are stressful in the body. One of the
Yeah.
biggest things I see is under eating. Women are just not eating enough calories throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize that when we're not getting in enough calories and there's a large deficit, you can get away with under eating if you're trying to quick lose some weight or, de-bloat before you got to zip into a dress for the weekend. Women can get away with doing that short term, but a lot of people chronically undereat and eat in a large deficit long term. And that can really slow things down because the body is not being properly supported and fed. And also, what happens is when we undereat, it spikes your stress hormones, your cortisol and adrenaline, because the body realizes, oh, we're not getting enough fuel. I'm not safe. And when the body doesn't feel safe, it goes into that fight or flight mode, right? Which is a
Yeah.
stress response. And that fight or flight mode puts that body into kind of conservation. And what happens is when we're in conservation, the body stops sending hormones and energy to non-essential things like you're supporting your skin, supporting your hair, supporting your nails, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
supporting your digestion. So that's why
Right.
oftentimes like the constipation and slow digestion happens when we're stressed out because that part of your body is just not getting as much attention.
Yeah.
And the body goes into conservation mode, and that's when we can really see some chronic health issues happen. Another thing that happens with stress is if you wake up and you drink a cup of coffee on an empty stomach first thing, which I did for a decade. I mean, that was
Mm-hmm.
my thing, my routine. I'd wake up and have my morning coffee and I'd pull out my Bible and my journal and I'd have an hour or half hour and just have my quiet time. And then
Mm-hmm.
I realized I learned about how stressful that is on the body to do, because you're already in a depleted state from fasting all night. If you went to bed at 10 o'clock and you didn't eat all night long, and then you wake up at 6 a.m. and you throw a high caffeine beverage into your system, that's just a
Yeah.
recipe for spiked stress hormones, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I started to really make the correlation in that, like, I was really snappy and short with my kids in the morning. The smallest thing would set me off, and I would yell or just be short with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I was doing the coffee on the empty stomach. So I really tell people drink your coffee after you've had a well balanced breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
um, you should also eat breakfast within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up. That's another great way to keep your stress hormones supported and
Mm.
balances your blood sugar. When our blood sugar is not balanced, that creates high stress in the body.
Right.
I talk a lot on my Instagram about eating every 3 to 4 hours. And so for me, I eat 5 to 6 small meals a day. I do my breakfast when I wake up around 7, and then I eat a little snack around 10, lunch around 1, and then I eat a snack with the kids when they get home. And if you think
Yeah.
about it, when we're babies and we're toddlers and we're little kids, you're probably experiencing this, like they want to
Yeah.
eat every
All the time.
2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's a fast, well, fueled metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, as we grow up, we just like disconnect with our body's hunger cues and we follow these
Right.
rules of like, oh, it's not time to eat.
Right. And just
Um,
accepting that I think something that's a good example that everyone probably experiences is like hangry. We all are like, oh, I get so hangry. And like taking those little signs, whether it's being hangry or like for you, like snapping at your kids in the morning, like I think we often just accept like that's who I am.
yeah,
For you, like, oh, I'm not a morning person. That's why I do it. Like, we just, instead of like, oh, this could be because I am literally starving, I'm running on nothing,
yes.
you
Yeah. And I
know?
used to tell myself, like, oh, I have anger issues. I yell too much. And now I look back and I'm like, my blood sugar was
Mm-hmm.
completely not regulated. I wasn't eating enough. And I see that with my kids, like with my little guy, Turner. I pick him up from school around 3. And I know when I go to pick him up, I better have a snack in the car for him.
That is
Yeah.
amazing. I remember being like that after school. Like, if my mom doesn't have a snack, she is gonna get it. Uh, so what are some good like stress reduction things that people can do?
Other thing, okay, so the eating consistently throughout the day,
Yes.
eat breakfast when you wake up, don't drink coffee on an empty stomach. Also, don't
Hmm.
work out on an empty stomach. That's another super stressful thing. I also think another stress reduction thing that we can do is get outside and go for a walk and get in the natural, unfiltered sunlight as often as you can. The winter brought out a lot of seasonal depression for people and winter blues. And that's a lot of that's from low vitamin D and just not
Yeah.
getting outside and moving the body and, getting natural sunlight. I think that is really important. I'm also a huge fan of taking a nightly bath. I don't do it every night, but I try to take a bath a couple times a night with a big scoop of Epsom salts, and I do my oils, and I'll read a
Hmm.
book or listen to a podcast, whatever. I can't say enough about quality sleep. Create a sleep routine. It looks different for everyone. For us, it's, the diffuser. I leave my phone downstairs. I no longer sleep with my phone in my room, which is such a hard habit to break. I still
Mm.
occasionally do bring my phone with me up to my room. We do the white noise machine, and
Yeah.
I did sleep with a weighted blanket for a while, but now we have the dog in bed. So
It's weighted enough.
yeah.
Those are so good. I think we also like, we just accept stress, like, because especially for moms, but for everyone, like, we just live in a very fast paced, schedule packed culture where, we just think because we're busy, which like we're all busy, I think like busy is just everyone's busy, right?
Hmm.
And so because we're busy, we just think that stress is normal. We're not like, okay, I am really stressed out. What's going on?
Yeah.
It's just like, this is life. This is how it is, instead of saying like, there, I have to do something. Or we think, especially as women, that it's like selfish to
Yes.
pour into stress reduction.
Yeah. And I will say, when you tune into your hormones, when you tune into when you're getting your period, right? Like there is a huge difference in your energy, in your mental clarity, in your mood, in your appetite, even when
Mhm.
you are about to get your period or on your period versus when you are ovulating, right? And so one of the things that I've learned to do, and I talk about this with anyone that's willing to listen, like if I have a friend that's having a meltdown, we all have that time with our friends where we're like,
Yeah.
just I hate my husband or whatever,
Yeah.
my kids are driving me crazy.
Hmm.
I always ask I'll say, like, where are you in your cycle? I don't know. I'm like, well, maybe it sounds like you might be about to get your period or whatever. It's not that you want to like blame everything on your period, but I think when we can listen to our hormonal cues and understand, like, oh, in the 2 or 3 days when I am leading up to my period, those are days that I should not have anything super important on my schedule. That's probably not the time to host a big get together or have a super important, intense work meeting. I mean, sometimes stuff comes up that we just have to show up for, but I do think there is a little bit of a science to tuning into that and leaning into it. And when you start to pay attention to that, you'll find that your periods are less stressful. You'll feel less frazzled. Like I personally try to schedule the important things, like my extroverted tasks, like a Zoom call or meetings, or, if we're having people over for a dinner, I try to schedule that around the time that I'm ovulating when I know I'll have more energy, right? Or in the
Hmm.
beginning of my cycle. And then as my cycle goes on and I get closer to my period, that's when I'm doing more of like introverted head down tasks, like, paying bills or organizing or admin related stuff, right?
Yeah.
And scheduling in rest. Like when I know, like I think my period's due next week. I will proactively look at the week when I'm planning out what I'm doing and say, okay, I'm not going to decide to cook 5 dinners from scratch this week. Instead, we'll cook 2 dinners from scratch. We'll order a pizza one night and another night we'll eat out of the freezer or,
Yeah.
have something easy, right?
Right. That's
But the
yeah.
problem is like we don't step off the crazy hamster wheel of life to do that. And we have to do that. We really do.
Right. So that's kind of like a sneak peek into cycle syncing. Is that right?
Yes.
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 So I wish we had enough time to do a deep dive into cycle syncing, and maybe that should be like a whole other episode because it's so interesting. But can you kind of do like a brief little like intro or whatever overview of cycle syncing? And then like maybe like a resource that if people are like, this is interesting, I want to learn more, what they can go look up or whatever.
Absolutely. So, cycle syncing is tuning into your body's hormonal highs and lows. And from a biological standpoint, your hormones are not the same, in the beginning of the month versus the end of the month. We are not like men. Men have a 24-hour clock. We
Hmm.
have more of like a 30-day clock, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Hmm.
And, we have a lot of fluctuations that change our energy throughout the month. And so, in the beginning of your cycle, your day one is really when you get your period. Okay. So pretend you get your period on April 1st. That's day one, and you have your uterus is shedding its lining. That is when you are going to have the lowest energy. That's a good time to really just rest. And I always say reflect. It's a good time to look back at the prior 4 to 5 weeks and say, okay, what went really well? What didn't? What worked? Kind of internal time, right? It's
Hmm.
not a time to be like brainstorming or taking on a big project. All
Yeah.
right. And you're not going to want to. Most women, the first 2 or 3 days on your period, you're just like, I can't even think. Right.
Hmm.
And then after your period tapers off, we transition to the follicular phase, and that lasts about 10 or so days. And that is, when your hormones are starting to surge again, you're starting to kind of regain your energy. And that is like the brainstorm time of the month. That's when you get out your calendar or your notebook and you're like, okay, what do we want to get done? Maybe you have more creativity, ideas, planning, get stuff scheduled. And from an exercise standpoint, as your energy starts to increase, that's a good time to do like those HIIT workouts, get on a
Hmm.
bike, go for a run. You start to feel good again. And then when you ovulate, which, typically happens for most women between like days 12 and 16 of their cycle, really depends. It can look different for everyone, but, I ovulate pretty much right around day 14, right? And that is when you typically have the most energy. Your skin is actually more glowy. You might have a better hair days. You just, you have those days that you get dressed and you put on your makeup and you put on a little lipstick and you're like, damn, I look good.
Yes.
That's when you're versus like right before you get your period, you're like, ugh.
Yes.
Um, but that time is when you are best for communicating extroverted stuff. So that's a good time to do like projects, collaborate with people, schedule a girls' night, have people over. You're better at having hard conversations when you're ovulating as well. And from an exercise standpoint, that is like when your energy should be at its prime. Like have at it at the gym, right? And then I should also say too, your appetite is typically lower in the beginning of your cycle. I always find the first 2 weeks of my cycle, I'm just not as hungry. And that's
Hmm.
because the metabolism is not as fired up. And then after you ovulate, you will start to feel maybe just a little bit more tired. Okay. The energy does start to taper down a little bit. And that's when you'll potentially feel more pulled to do inward tasks like the head down stuff, the admin work, the finish the things that you said you were going to do this month, right?
Hmm.
Get the crap done. And then from an exercise standpoint, that's when I do like more weightlifting, walking, yoga, or just not as intense of a workout. Your metabolism also speeds up in the second half of your cycle. So you're going to need more calories. It's not uncommon right before you get your period to have more cravings. Like that's why women crave chocolate and
Mhm.
sweets and carbs, because your body is preparing to shed its lining and it needs more food. So don't
Yeah.
silence those cues. I mean, be mindful of what you eat. Don't just like grab, a Chick-fil-A milkshake, although those are really good when you're PMSing. But there's a reason why you have more cravings at that time. You just need to eat
Mhm.
more.
Wow. But I'm
Yeah.
like, my mind has been
And
blown.
yeah, and I do have a cycle syncing mini class with a really good ebook. It's linked on my Instagram profile and it's also linked on my website too.
Okay. And I'll pop that in the show notes. So if
Okay.
you guys listening are like, this is so cool, just go to the show notes and that'll be linked. And you have an upcoming course, right? Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So the course is going to be really a framework for a lot of the things that we just talked about. It will be launching in early May. I have a date. I don't have a date set in stone yet. I'm trying to be fluid about that. Um, and what I'm going to really do is teach women how to implement pro metabolic eating. And we're going to really talk about the diet culture stuff and better understand what do our bodies need on a biological level for longevity, for long-term health. I'm going to teach women how to really tune into their hormones. There will be a whole section on the cycle syncing and also teaching women how to troubleshoot too. There's a lot of different little things you can do to learn how to tune in and figure out like, oh, why am I responding this way to this food? Or just teaching people how to tune in and kind of do a check-in with the body. And I'm going to give really practical kitchen tips, right? Like meal prep, shopping lists, a meal plan, some really good recipes will come with it, and really break it down in a practical, easy to implement way. And we will have a whole section on stress as well, with some more practical things to implement, a section with exercise and how to exercise in a way that supports your metabolism.
Hmm.
Because believe it or not, if you overdo it with exercise, you can end up doing more harm than good.
Hmm.
That's why people get injured or, just you can actually end up destroying more muscle than building muscle if you overdo it. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. That will launch in May. And I'm also going to be implementing pocket coaching with that, which will be a little bit different. So, you'll have the online modules with videos and worksheets and things like that. But I'm also going to incorporate texting with it. And that will give people more direct access to me as they go through the course. I
Hmm.
don't know that I'm going to offer that long term, but for this first round, I'm really excited to do that. And that'll also just give people a next level of accountability too.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
it sounds amazing. I'm so excited for this. And so for listeners that were listening along and just like me nodding their head and like, yep, I struggle with this, this course would be perfect for you. So I will also link the course registration or whatever you want to call it in the show notes too. So I'm really excited about that. Like I said in the beginning, I just have to say it again. I am very easily overwhelmed and very easy like if something overwhelms me, I'm just like, I'm not doing any of it. Like, I'll just still sit here with my
Yes.
PUFAs or whatever because I'm too confused. And I love that about learning from you is it doesn't feel so complicated that it's like, who does she think I am? So I just really appreciate that. And I'm excited for people to hear this and all of the things. If you were to pick like one takeaway for people to have from this episode, what would it be?
If I had to tell women like one thing that they could, and even just from like a food standpoint, eat a daily raw carrot salad. It
I love
sounds
that.
so simple and basic, but if your health is in a place of you're like, oh, something feels off, or if anything I said really resonated with you, that you're like, oh man, I have that issue, or I totally relate. The daily raw carrot salad can be such a good tool to do to support your digestion. The raw carrot can help bind to endotoxins in the gut and help remove endotoxins from the gut. And so, if you're dealing with like digestive issues, And even like, if you have acne, like a lot of your acne and skin stuff is linked to gut imbalances that daily raw carrot can really help support. The raw carrot can also help with symptoms from estrogen dominance. A lot of women have estrogen dominance, and that happens from the food we eat, the products we use, stress.
Hmm.
That's like such an easy thing to implement, and it can really make a big difference for people.
I
And
love that.
just eating every 3 to 4 hours. Like, don't skip food all day long. It's not worth it.
Yeah. I'm nodding my head, but like I needed that
Set a
encouragement
timer.
because I definitely skip. So if you guys are feeling like you're like head down like a dog getting
Yeah.
in trouble because you're like, oops, that's me. I'm right there with you, but we can do better. I mean, I said that you deliver things in like a very easy to a doable way. And then you did it like eat raw carrots. It's not this
Yeah.
like add this, like super confusing. So that's encouraging. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Yes.
Okay. I fill in the blank for this one. I wish I could tell my younger self blank.
Ooh, that's a good one. I wish I could tell my younger self that you don't have to overachieve on everything.
Oh, that's a good one.
I was
I didn't
like
even,
an overachiever. Like I wanted to have the perfect grades and be recognized as successful. And that even translated into, college and post college. Like I just was so like overachiever
yeah. I,
and it was rooted in some of the wrong things.
mhm.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. I didn't ask you in this interview what your Enneagram number is, but since Whimsy and Wellness fans are pretty into the Enneagram, so can you share that?
I'm a 3 wing 4.
If you guys didn't guess with the achiever part.
Yes, I am which the 3 is the achiever. Yeah, but I didn't stop to smell the roses enough when I was younger. I
Hmm.
was so focused on like, I was too serious about life.
That's a good one. Okay. What's a book that changed your life?
Oh, I have it right here. The
Oh,
Untethered Soul.
oh, I've
The
heard of
Untethered
this.
Soul by Michael A. Singer. It's so, so good. I mean,
I've heard of that.
yeah, it really helps you silence the inner voice in your head that messes with whatever it is you're trying to do. You know how we all have that
Mm,
voice that's like, you don't have time for that, or you're not qualified, or just we make up stories and
yeah.
lies. And
Hmm.
this book is really about like detaching yourself from that. And it's really good.
Ooh, I've definitely like even I recognized the cover when you pulled it up, and yeah, I've heard of that. So I'll link that in the show notes too. We'll just have a bunch of links for you guys listening.
Yeah, it's a self-help book. I pick it up, once a year. I'll page through it. It's super underlined. Yeah.
Oh, those are the best kind. Okay, since we're whimsy and wellness, what is your go-to essential oil roller blend?
Ooh, I have a blend that I use. I called it Slay,
Ooh.
and it has Valor, Sacred Frankincense, Royal Hawaiian Sandalwood, Patchouli, I think bergamot. Yes,
Mm,
it's a really good one. I think it's like
sounds
10
so
drops of
dreamy.
each. Yeah, I love anything with Valor in it personally.
Do you know what's so funny is every Young Living member that I've interviewed on the show that I've asked, like, what's your go-to blend? Maybe with the exception of one, but I feel like everyone has said Valor with something else. It's
Yeah.
so funny. They're all just like, oh, definitely Valor.
Well,
So,
I don't know if you remember, but there was a time when Valor, I'm like dating myself. There was a time when you couldn't get Valor. You couldn't. It was not
yeah.
available for a long time. And I remember I was pregnant with Turner, and I had a really old bottle with just a little bit left at the bottom. And I saved it for labor because I was,
Oh my
I knew
gosh.
that oil was going to help me. And that was a
Yeah.
labor that I actually had to go natural because I had low blood platelets and low iron, which now I know that was probably a nutrition issue. And my OBGYN was like, you can't get an epidural because if you have low blood platelets, that, puts you at risk for excess bleeding or whatever. And so I went into that labor of like, I have to have all the tools to have this baby naturally.
Yeah.
And that little bottle of Valor with the old label.
I love that. That is so
got me through.
for listeners who aren't familiar with Valor, maybe they aren't a Young Living member or whatever. Do you know what's in, not to put you on the spot, but just do you know what's in the blend?
There's definitely blue tansy. I think there's patchouli in it too.
I know those are the two I was thinking of.
Yeah. And there's, I forget what else, but yeah,
It's so good.
When you like don't have access to one of your favorite oils for a while, then you're like, hoard it.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay. And then where can listeners find you?
You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Margaret Ann Powell. And then I have a blog that's just margaretpowell.com. Those are probably the two main places.
Perfect. And I will link that. Well, thank you so much. I've learned so much. And like I said, it's just been really encouraging and empowering. So I so appreciate you.
Good. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yay.